That's the first step. I want to be free. I mean, you have to be tired of the jail, but you have to be not just tired of the jail, you have to want freedom. And when you want it, that's the first step. Then you start examining yourself to see where you're not free. And in that self-examination, you discover that you've always been free. And that's the awakening. And so that can take as long as it takes or whatever it takes. But that's the end of the old life of slavery. But it's not the end. That's the beginning. Now you've entered the gate. There's still the mansion.
Here we are, Ashland, Oregon.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me to be here. This book right here, a very beautiful book. It's called Wake Up and Roar, a Satsang with Papaji. Me and this guy who I'm waiting to introduce, we kind of co-narrated it.
Yes, we did.
I would say.
We co-narrated it.
Beautiful book. And that's what we're here to talk about. So without further ado, Eli Jaxon-Bear, who are you?
The same one that's asking this question. The same one that hears this answer.
Does that have a name or form? What is that?
Whatever name we give it creates some sort of idea in the mind, and that's limited. So we can call it love, intelligent consciousness, true reality. But all those are limitations because we can't speak of what is so big it's bigger than language. So we do our best in coming close. Danger of coming close is it then becomes a concept in the mind, and then we have an idea of it, and then a belief in it, and then a practice of it.
So all we can do is point to it.
You can point, you can realize it, and then let it speak, and then it speaks as it does. With the limited language that any of us have.
Very good. Very good. Now, the book is called Wake Up and Roar. What does that title mean? What is waking up and what's roaring?
So waking up, you can wake up about anything. You can, if you don't know how car engines work and someone shows you, you become enlightened about that. It's like you were ignorant before. Now you're enlightened. You're awake about how car engines work. So we can become enlightened about anything. But to become enlightened about who we are is the rarest. Because people never ask, who am I? They always ask, who are you? Who are you in relationship to me? Are you a friend? Are you an enemy? Are you good for me, bad for me, attractive, not attractive? It's always about who are you? And we're taught to never ask, who am I? We believe we already know who I am because we've been given a name. Where'd that name come from, I'm Eli, you're Prince. Who said so?
Yeah.
So it's made up. And along with that made-up identity of the name comes the whole history of the body. These are your parents. This is where you went to school. Now you're a student, These are all labels that get put on us by society. And so we take our labels and we identify with them as if that's me. So I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy, I'm a tough guy, I love, I hate, whatever it is. We take all the different attitudes to the world and our conditioning and our genetics together and call that me. When you wake up by examining it, by looking at it directly from consciousness back reflecting on its own source, then you wake up to the truth of who you are. And this is what we're all hungry for. Because this is freedom. And not only freedom, but then you get true responsibility. Because in our world today, we see the nightmare of ignorance. Ignorance destroying the world. Ignorance of the human family destroying each other. And so we, instead of blaming the ignorant ones, which is easy to see, we can see the ignorant ones. We know who they are. But we don't see in the mirror, what about the ignorance that's here?
Yeah, that's it.
And so if I'm willing to meet the ignorance here, which is a much more challenging task than blaming the ignorant ones on the outside, then I end ignorance where I am. And when I end ignorance where I am, there's a roar of life. There's a roar of freedom, a roar of truth, a roar of saying, this is my stand no matter what. I am not betraying myself. I'm not selling out for anything or anyone or anybody. This is true, and I am as I am. And that roar changes the world because it's a roar of silent love. It's not a shout.
This realization, is it spontaneous? Does one have to continue to practice anything? Do you just find out who you are and that's it forever? What happens next?
So first, it's only spontaneous when it is, and it can take years to lead up to it.
Okay.
But you can't practice it. You can't practice being yourself. But what you can do is first find out, what do you want deeper than your conditioned wants? As animals, we've all been conditioned by our genetics, which means from our genetics, we're conditioned for safety, security, relationship, and sex. Those are the drives of the animal. Every animal wants safety, security, relationship, and sex.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's one drive. Then there's the drive of society. You should want this. You ought to want that. You're a good, bright guy. You should be doing this. And we take on all the expectations of our society. And we put that together with the animal drives, and we call it having free will. And there's no free will in it. And so when you finally realize that, and you say, I want to be free, that's the first step. I want to be free. That's the beginning. Now you've entered the gate. There's still the mansion. There's still the infinite, unknown areas of yourself that you've never seen before. It's a lifetime.
Always a deepening.
Always deepening realization, deepening insights, deepening love, deepening capacity to bear everything.
Beautiful. Tell me about Papaji. Who was Papaji?
Papaji was a man like us. He had a wife and kids, and he didn't particularly get along with his wife. She didn't get along with him. She didn't like that he ran off on a spiritual search and left her. I mean, he supported them, but he wasn't around. But since a little boy, he had a desire to know God. That's what he called it, to know God. And so he fell in love with Krishna as a very young boy, and for many, many decades would get up at 4 a.m. to do these chants to Krishna. I mean, he put himself into a trance state to where eventually Krishna would come and play with him.
And Krishna is who? Who's Krishna?
Krishna is one of the gods of the Hindu pantheon.
Okay.
Krishna is the god who is for the cowgirls.
Okay.
The cowgirls have Krishna who plays the flute for them and makes love with them while they're taking care of the herds of cattle. Krishna is also the one who goes into battle with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so Krishna is a god. And so he loves this god, and he prays, and he puts himself into altered states, and would play with this god. And at one point, he was in the officer training school for the British military before World War I, and he would get up hours before he had to do his thing with Krishna. And at one point, the commander told his adjutant to cut back on Punja's, toddies. He's too high, he's too happy. And he said he doesn't drink. It's not drink. He's just in bliss. And so he spent all this time with Krishna, but he never found a place where he could actually meet God. And so he went to all the gurus. He said, can you show me God? And they said, oh, wait, whoa, slow down, sit down, meditate for years. We'll talk about it later, And he'd look around the ashram and he'd see all these devotees with their long beards. They've been there for 30 years. They haven't met God yet, so he blew them all off. And then he heard of this saint who could show him God. So he went and traveled to find Ramana Maharshi in his mountain in Arunachala. And when he first got there, he didn't get it. He came into the hall, and Maharishi's sitting there in silence. What's the silence about, And he checks him out, and he doesn't talk. Nothing's happening. And so we thought, okay, well, forget this. I'll go up onto the mountain and play with Krishna. He had a couple days leave from his job. So he went up onto the mountain and he did his meditations. And as he's coming back, he came back to say goodbye. And Ramana said, oh, you're leaving? He says, oh, yes, I've been here. I've been meditating. He says, really? What have you been doing? He says, well, I've been playing with God. And he said, really? So you've been playing with God? That's wonderful. Is God here now? And he said, no. He says, oh, all that comes and goes is not real. Find what doesn't come and go, and you'll have found God. And that was his first teaching to him. And eventually he received the transmission, and he became infused with this self-knowledge of God. And he was so beautiful because he was a householder. He wasn't a monk. He wasn't an ascetic. He wasn't a yogi. He had to support his family. He had jobs. He worked until he was 65 when he retired. He was a mining engineer. He got out of the military as part of the Indian independence movement. He dropped out of his career as an officer, which freaked his wife out. And so he took this holy transmission out of the asceticism of the mountain and brought it into the marketplace.
Beautiful. And how did you meet Papaji?
I had a profound awakening in 1972 when I was a federal fugitive. And I was living in the mountains in Colorado. I was being hunted.
And what'd you do?
I jumped a policeman and freed a prisoner during May Days in 1971. And since it was in Washington, it was a federal offense.
Okay.
It started with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War giving a peace treaty to Congress. They were led by the paraplegic Medal of Honor winner who threw his medals on the floor. And so that started. And when Congress wouldn't accept the peace treaty between the United States and the Vietnamese people and the American people, our commitment was to nonviolently stop the government. And so 18,000 people, we went into the streets to stop all the traffic circles and bridges around Washington to shut down the government. And so I jumped this prisoner to galvanize the crowd. I didn't want to hurt anybody. So I just grabbed the policeman, yelled split, the prisoner left. Then when they busted me, the people in my little political collective energized the crowd. And so now there's, maybe 1,000 people coming at him going, free him, free him, free him, And he had me on the ground with his knee on my head and he pulled his gun. At which point I said, don't free me, The game's over, don't free me. And so they, took me away to maximum security. And
that's heavy. That's, wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it was. So now I didn't show up for my grand jury indictment for 2 counts of assault on a police officer. So I was now living underground with a federal fugitive thing. I was looking at a lot of years in prison. I was looking at 18 years, I think. And living in a cabin in Colorado, I had guns and dynamite and was connected to the Black Panthers. And I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. And so I called for help. I fasted for 3 days. I meditated. I did no meditation. See, this is the day in the dark age. There were no spiritual teachers. I read all the books I could, but I didn't know how to meditate. I never had a teacher. I didn't know anything. But I just sat, and then I felt this enormous paranoia that I'm surrounded, and I'm facing 18 years and plus who knows what, and I've got guns, and I'm freaked out. I don't know what to do. So it's a good day to die. If I'm going to die here, I can call for help. It's not a good day for die. I was freaked out. I was paranoid, but I thought, okay, if I'm going to die, I can use my death to call for help. Because if there's a God, and I didn't know if there's a God or not, but if there's a God, God must not know what's happening here. And maybe I could call for help. And so I experienced my death, and I woke up. And when I woke up, I was what I called outer space. There was nothing. It was completely empty, completely still, and so blissful, and so certain this is what I am. I am immortal consciousness. And I realized all of history is to lead up to this realization. And if everybody could realize this, the world's free.
Wow.
And so that became my mission. How do I pass this on?
Wow.
And so I went on a spiritual search. It took me 18 years to find Papaji.
Wow.
Okay, so now it's 1989.
Okay.
I'm a teacher. I'm teaching the Enneagram. I'm doing clinical hypnosis certifications at Esalen and in Austria.
Okay.
I'm teaching around the world. I taught in the Zen temple in Japan. I was brought back there. I had married to my best friend and partner. Gangaji and I met in 1976. We've been together since then. So
love her.
yeah, she's true goddess. And so I had a great life. My books were published. I was teaching in Europe and Esalen and Japan. I'm with my best friend and partner, but it wasn't enough.
You still wanted more of something.
I wanted to be able to transmit it. I'm teaching.
Okay.
Teaching the Enneagram. I'm doing clinical hypnosis. People are having great realizations. They're working as successful therapists. They're doing group leaders. There's all kinds of good stuff, but they're not self-realized. So I needed something more. And so I left it all and went searching for a teacher. And everyone thought I was 43 years old. It was 1990. Everyone said, you're having a midlife crisis. What are you doing? Going off into India. You don't even know anybody. You don't know where you're going. You're just going to go head off to find your teacher.
Yeah.
And I did.
And he pointed you the rest of the way.
He didn't do anything. I knocked on the door. Nobody knew I was coming, but I threw a long, it's in the book how it happened. So I found him. They say, he's waiting for you. Go on up. That blew my mind. He couldn't be waiting for me because nobody knew I was coming. So I go up in this tiny little house, up this open courtyard, and he's in his bedroom. He's on his bed. There's a room for a chair and a bed. And he's sitting on the bed, and he asked me to join him. So I sit on his bed with him. This is why you're here. I said, I'm ready to finally wake up. And I looked at him, and it was over.
It was over then.
Yeah. He looked at me, and I knew in that moment, for sure, I am looking at my own self. There's no one else here. I'm looking at my own self that sees me, loves me, recognizes me. And there was nothing else. And that was it. And I just fell in love, of course. I couldn't believe. Here's the rarest thing, a living Buddha, and I'm alone in his bedroom with him, you know. Oh my God. I gave him my money, my passport. I said, I don't even want to wake up. I just want to sleep outside your door, take care of you. We had our meals together and we went for walks together, and that was unbelievable, you know, the bliss of just being in the presence of a living Buddha. And after 3 or 4 days, I don't remember how long, I would sit with him when he read his mail in his bedroom. He had a chair up there, and I'd sit at his feet and hold his legs. And he said, oh, here's a letter from a couple. They're in Varanasi. They want to come visit me. I said, oh, no, don't let them, please. He said, I'm going to tell them to stay where you're staying. You take care of them. You show them the way. And so I became his assistant.
Okay.
I served tea in the meetings, and I served biscuits. And he said, you don't say anything. You just sit here and watch. He said, you're a special case. And I said, wow. All right. I want to be a special case.
We all want to be something special, yeah.
After the first meeting, after he'd said this, I had the first meeting. I said, so, Papaji, how am I a special case? He said, oh, you don't want to be? I said, oh, I do. You know, and it popped, you know. And then the ego inflations, you know. Just that's the beauty of a teacher, of a living teacher. is they can just pop your bubbles.
Yeah. That's it. You said when you came up to the door, he knew you were coming. What does that mean? Is there some type of psychic ability, or what is?
I have no idea.
Okay, that's okay. and throughout your time with Papaji, had you experienced any type of extrasensory?
Complete silence.
Just okay.
My mind stopped. Actually, I was after 3 days. I said to him, so Papaji, I've been with you for 3 days now. I'm still not enlightened. What should I do? He says, I'm surprised a smart boy like you.
Yeah.
He said, so let me tell you what my teacher told me. He said, now, any thoughts in your mind? I said, no. He said, so give rise to a thought. And so I watched the thought start to rise like a bubble. He said, now don't touch it. Let it sink back down. And I did. He said, now stay vigilant. And I did. And the silence deepened and deepened, and the bliss of knowing myself as love was so overwhelming. Love everywhere. And that went on for weeks.
There's no practice, but to observe it, is there a constant watching? Is that, or does it just naturally flower? Does the deepening just naturally happen when you're...
If you're willing to be quiet, the deepening naturally happens.
Quiet, okay.
If you're not willing to indulge the thought about something else.
Beautiful. And how do you experience the world now?
Everything's exactly the same. I'm with my same partner, doing my same work. I'm teaching the way I was teaching back before I met Papaji. Everything's exactly the same, and it is totally different. Because there's not an angry somebody judging whether it's right or not, judging what's wrong, who's wrong, what should be different. So it's filled with bliss. I love it. I love life.
So earlier when you told Papaji's story about Krishna, and that which comes and goes is not real. There's a great quote, and let me know if this is accurate. The guy said, if it doesn't occur in deep sleep, it's not real.
What occurs in deep sleep? That's it. But the danger is that people use this to switch categories, do category jumps, to where something's going on in your life and it's painful to somebody else, and there's immediate heat on it, and you go, oh, it's not real, it doesn't matter. That's not it. In that moment, it's real and it matters. So you can't use this to avoid. People use this spiritual bypass to avoid the unpleasantness of their life. They say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's not real, we're all one. And those become the new religion as a way to avoid the pain of living.
Escapism.
Escapism in the name of non-duality.
Brilliant. So we have a very... I don't even know the word, but a dynamic political atmosphere today.
We've lost the republic. The empire is falling.
Yeah. What words of wisdom would Papaji give the world today?
A true democracy requires an enlightened citizenry. And since we don't have an enlightened citizenry, we don't have a true democracy. And now, as the empire falls, we don't even have a republic. We have an oligarchy. But oligarchies have shown up in the past, and the people have come back and overtaken them. It happened in Athens several times, where the People took back their democracy, and then they lost it and they took it back. But the tragedy that has happened with us that Athens really shows is when Athens went from being a democracy to being an empire, they lost their moral integrity. And in that, they ended up losing their whole everything. And the same things happened to this country. As we became an empire, we lost our moral integrity. And so all empires fall. And so that's kind of a historical inevitability. That's going to happen no matter what. But how it falls, if we have an enlightened citizenry, it can be a soft, gentle landing instead of a crash. The odds are it's going to be a crash into totalitarianism, but we'll see. Enlightened citizenry could stop that.
How do we do that? How do we achieve that? How do we spread
one by one, heart by heart.
Right.
It starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with everybody who hears this. If everyone who hears this is willing to take responsibility for themselves, to not be a victim, to not blame, even though there are millions of things we can blame for that are really worth blaming, you stop blaming and you stop being a victim. You take responsibility. You then start to examine yourself and wake up. And when you wake up, you're one less slave, one less spot of suffering on Mother Earth. And then it spreads, because whoever watches this with us, if they wake up, the people around them will catch it. And the people around them will catch it. And it becomes this, diffusion through the gene pool. As it is. That's what's happening right now. We're also, as well as the fall, as well as the collapse, we're in an age of enlightenment. I mean, I've been watching it now since the 70s, and nobody ever heard of freedom, a quiet mind. When the first gurus came over, with the Beatles, it was all about transcendental meditation was the first one, and then Yogananda, and worshiping the guru, and all these different practices. None of them said have a quiet mind. And I've been with Tibetans, I was with Zen, I was with all these different, I've been with gurus. No one said your mind can be silent right now. So now, that's in the gene pool. That's a meme that has spread. Silence and freedom has spread. There's people all over the world who are investigating this and investigating themselves. That's a whole new phenomenon.
This is what you're seeing.
I'm seeing this. I go to Australia, I go to New Zealand, I go to Europe, and I see that people are deeper, they're more awake, and they're more committed. I remember when Satsang first started, when Gangaji started her first Satsang, people didn't know what she was talking about. It seemed like a foreign language.
Interesting.
And now every yoga teacher on the corner is spouting it. And there were no yoga teachers on the corner when this started.
Yeah.
So it's all just, that's part of the, that's the good news and the bad news. Because it spreads through the culture, it also quickly becomes a style rather than a substance.
I remember you telling me that your mission for why you're here is to help to free the world.
World peace and freedom.
And
by everybody waking up.
What does freedom and peace look like in the world?
When everyone's awake? Wouldn't that be wonderful to see? I don't expect to be around to see it, but I would love to. I'll do whatever I can to bring it on.
Yeah, it's like there's a guy named Gary Weber. Are you familiar with this guy? He says that there needs to be a new operating system, right? Not adding more software onto the human, but changing the whole operating system from the I thought. Because, as you said, the problems in the world come from the mind. All of these, every creation really comes out of the mind, and good and bad comes out of the mind. But the realization that you are not the mind.
At that point, you don't need a new operating system. If you are transcendent of the operating system, then operating system is included. It doesn't matter. Then I, as a servant of something bigger. The problem is when I thinks it's in charge. When the servant thinks it's running the household.
Right.
When the servant becomes a true servant, then I bows down to the truth of itself. And then you don't need a new operating system. You're just the master's home.
Beautiful. So I guess to everybody watching this, I want to ask you, how is enlightenment, does it take a long time, or can we get it right here, right now? What does one need to do?
Simply stop. All of our doing is the operating system. It's all I operating on its objects. So the nature of suffering is this imaginary I in relationship with its objects. Objects meaning women, stuff, men, partners, money, whatever you're in relationship with, there's an I and an it. That's the basic duality of suffering. And so all that requires a lot of doing. We're always doing something. We're working on our relationship. We're working on our money. We're working on our career. We're working on having a baby. We're working on taking care of the baby. We're working on whatever it is. And it's so much work and it's so hard. This is the opposite of that. No work, not hard. Simply stop. Just stop everything you're doing, and what's left is the truth. Because all the doing is the operating system. So you don't need a new one. Just put it on pause.
That's great. That's great. What's your thoughts on the benefit of things like pranayama, breath, to still the mind so that we can come to this point of realization?
You know, anything is potentially a benefit, and it's all potentially a poison. No one has ever woken up with just pranayama. And there's nothing wrong with pranayama. Every practice is a discipline. Disciplines are useful for the animal. We're all animals. This is an animal. And so when an animal is disciplined, it has a better life. You know, you look at the dogs that are not well trained, they're barking and they're angry and they're fighting. And you look at the dogs that are well trained, they're happier. And so we are training ourselves. And so discipline is how we train ourselves. And there's nothing bad about it, but it won't lead you to freedom. But it will lead you to a more disciplined life. And that's nice. That's good. I mean, my teacher, you know, as I said, did his Krishna devotions for so many decades. They didn't bring him to freedom, but they brought him a certain focus of presence to search for freedom.
Yeah.
And so anything can be useful in that way. And anything's a trap if you stay with it and it's not bringing you what you really want. But that's one of the traps, is people settle for good enough. Hey, I'm practicing, I'm doing my yoga, I'm doing my pranayama, I'm doing my karma yoga, I'm trying to be more, you know, I'm trying to be better, I'm trying to be in the now. And people settle for that as if that's good enough. Yeah. That's not good enough. I mean, you know, it's better than hanging out in the bar. It's better than hanging out shooting dope. But it's not good enough. Don't settle. You can have the whole enchilada. Don't settle for just what falls on the floor.
For me, when an idea of trying to get more comes, and it comes, you know, I want to read more books or find a new thing to do. But when it comes, immediately I observe it and it goes. But it comes.
Sure.
Is the best advice, and maybe I already know the answer, is just to stay here, to be quiet.
Staying here and being quiet doesn't involve any doing or not doing. Activities happen. Books get read. Projects get formed. That's all happens in silence. But if that's what's running the show, then it's the avoidance of silence. If silence is running the show, that's an expression of silence. So it's really not about doing or not doing, or activity or not activity. It's about, where is the seat of motivation coming from? Is it coming from the desire to have fame and fortune and sex and whatever? Or is it coming from the truth of yourself? If it's coming from the deep truth of yourself as silent love, what can the harm be? And if there is harm, you stop it.
I think I, along with many other people, have an idea about enlightenment, about a realized state. It's just an idea. But this idea, it's a pestering idea. It's a pestering. It comes. I see it and I catch it. I'm very vigilant.
Beautiful.
And all is well. I'm here. And
there's always going to be traps and temptations. Snares along the way.
Yeah.
But once you're found, you know, everything takes care of itself. You just stay true to yourself.
Because because you had said that, I'm trying to remember your exact words, where you weren't there yet. You knew you had more to do, or well, how do you put it? You put it in a certain way.
You know, what I was really saying is that when I was teaching, where I was doing therapy, I had a quiet mind, open heart. I was alive and free.
Yeah.
But then when the therapy session was over, or the teaching was over, I put my shoes on. I put my stuff on with it. So even though I knew from that moment in the cabin that I was immortal consciousness, I was still caught in my egoic identity as a somebody. So those were both there simultaneously. And so what I needed was that final cut.
And do you believe it was through your effort that got that final cut, or just happened when it was meant to happen? And
Papaji called through grace. You know, I was like a nail being pulled to a magnet. So glad you're here.
Yeah, me too.
Look forward to coming back.
Yeah, for sure.
I really do. Thank you for this gift.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. If you haven't joined the family yet, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and click that little bell so that you never miss a beat. And for more insider information, challenges, and offers, sign up to my personal email list at princeea.com. And lastly, don't forget this: make each breath count. Peace.